Welcome to Circle Time, the Early Years podcast. I'm Glenn Denny. My guest on this edition has over 30 years of experience working with children in many types of settings. He's the winner of the Training Award at the 2019 National Playwork Awards, a speaker at national, regional and international conferences, including Nursery World and the International Play Association, as well as the author of A Very Unusual Journey into Play. Welcome to the podcast, Ben Kingston-Hughes.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's brilliant to have you. So obviously your specialism is play, but it's one of these. Now, I've had a conversation with somebody recently about play, and it's one of those kind of phrases that, do you think it's lost its way in terms of early years?
I think that the problem will always be with play, that some of the most important things we ever do with children are the things that look the most frivolous and the silliest. And it is one of the reasons why early years is undervalued, because people on the outside watching a group of, say, baby room workers rolling around on the floor with babies are not going to look at the neurological development going on there. They're going to look at it as just play and somehow silly or frivolous. So I suppose there is this view that we need to be more professional and perhaps not talk about play. But I think that then undermines the incredible importance of play in the first place. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be basically upskilling the world into the value of play rather than devaluing it by calling it something else, or by kind of marginalizing it in its importance with working with young children. And actually, I've seen it all my life, absolute moments of play that just transcend anything a child's experienced before and actually change lives. And I work with vulnerable children. So I work with Ukrainian children at the moment. So I'm working with children who've been adopted children. So we've got a lovely project with newly adopted children and their families to help them bond with their new families. So we take them out in the woods, we dig holes, we make fires, we do all the outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
And to see the progress that those simple moments of play, see what that does to a vulnerable child, it's just mind-blowing. And this is every single time we work with children. So you can't underestimate play, even though the rest of society does.
I think that's right. I mean, there is that bit where, looking from the perspective as a practitioner and now a manager, that, some people just look at us and go, oh, it must be nice you just get to play all day. And it's that irritating phrase. But actually, should we value that comment and say, yes, we do play, but this is what we do with play?
Yeah, we should own it. I do realize, I think I've just said that you can't overestimate play, and I think I meant to say you can't underestimate play. So maybe that's one for an edit, but no, we need to own it. We need to be loud and proud. I think we're past the point where we think play might be a bit good for children. The research is there. It's a concordance of evidence to say that moments of play are transformative for children. So we need to be loud and proud about it. We need to acknowledge play, not just an optional extra to childhood, but something that is profound and life-changing. And I think that's the problem, is taking that next step. We're always a little bit reluctant to do that because it doesn't sound as important as learning. But when you see it firsthand, it is fundamentally how children develop.
But it's that bit where a child's play is them tinkering with something, exploring something, turning things upside down. Like if we're looking at babies, for example, the way they explore things, that's their play, that's them doing, but that's also them learning. That's all the kind of the neurological stuff going on in their heads. And, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And when you see it with a baby and then you see it in a 19-year-old, it's the same process. It might look differently, and obviously the play changes, but the process of exploring your world and finding out about and experimenting and being creative within that world, that is off the scale in terms of your neurological development. And that's what we're seeing with our children. So at every age, every stage of development, play is a positive force for building brains, for improving creativity, but also for understanding your world. And that's what my first book is all about. It's about that kind of, it's about the bits of play that we tend to forget because we don't value it as much. And it all came about because I used to talk about mental health and well-being, and it seemed to be falling on deaf ears. It seemed to be that, I don't know if it's this country or if it's a global thing, but we don't seem to value mental health as much as perhaps we should. And it was only when I looked at the neuroscience and that the fundamental changes in the shape of brains, for instance, that's when people started to listen. So the book is called A Very Unusual Journey into Play because it was my journey into the neuroscience of play, and
Yeah.
along the way, seeing directly how that's impacted on the children I work with. And it was, yeah, a real journey because I didn't know anything about the neuroscience of play. And now this is something that I use all the time as ammunition to persuade people how important it all is.
It really is. I mean, there was something when you were talking there. There was something that just cropped into my mind. It was like as a prime example of if you watch children at play in a nursery and they go into the role play corner, say that they make you a cup of tea, but they're acting out what they've seen. They're cementing those ideas, but it's in their play.
Yeah, yeah, and it's children can act out completely realistic things. So, if you come from a family where the parents argue a lot, if those children play mummies, daddies, they will work through that by doing that exact behavior. I saw a nativity once, and this was reception class, and Joseph and Mary are on stage, but Joseph needs a wee, so everything's held up while goes for a wee. When Joseph comes back on stage, Mary, 5 years old, looks at him and goes, "Well, if you can't look after yourself, how do you expect to look after a baby?" And her
Oh
mum was in the audience going, "Oh," because that wasn't in the script. It just
my.
come from her observations. So, yeah, children play what they see, but then they take it to the next level. So they will play, very realistic play, but then there'll also be dragons. There'll be, slugs and worms crawling across the floor one day. So imaginative play is amazing. It's one of the things I researched. And it is just mind blowing what it does to the brain. I mean, it activates an entire firework display of activity in your brain, just really simple imagination. And it could potentially be the most powerful brain growth tool that we have for early years is those simple moments of imaginative play. And actually working with parents, we're having parents say, "Well, I don't really do that with my children. I feel a bit more embarrassed about that sort of play." Well, that's not every parent, but it is something we hear quite a
Yeah.
lot. Is it's the type of play that parents are most reluctant because they feel silly doing it, obviously. But actually, when you look at what it's doing to the brain, it is a virtual firework display. It's incredibly powerful, and it's something no animal can do except for humans.
Yeah.
Some of the play behaviors we share with dogs and cats, we've got these instinctive play behaviors. So we all jump off stuff and run around and roll around and chase a ball, for instance. But it's the imagination where we differ from any other animal on the planet. So yeah.
It is quite interesting. You're talking about the imagination as well, and some parents not so much accepting it, but not going with it, going along on that journey with them. I mean, there was one of the children arrived at my setting today and decided he was going to be a dinosaur. And he arrived in the dinosaur, in the car with his mum as a dinosaur. And his mum went, "Yeah, we haven't got him today. We've just got a dinosaur." Like, "Oh, okay, well, we've got space for a dinosaur then. That's absolutely fine." But this dinosaur came into nursery and then started playing being a dinosaur out in the garden. And then the other children, friends of dinosaur came and joined in with
Yeah.
dinosaur and became dinosaurs. And the next thing you know, we've got Jurassic Park. But that was just one child being supported by their parent
Yeah.
to be there, to be this dinosaur. And then we supported it as well. We kind of took the baton from mum and
Yeah.
carried on. And then the next thing, it just exploded into this amazing dinosaur play.
And that's a magical experience for that child. And we can't, that is so powerful. And in the best early year settings, that's happening every other day. You'll have key workers just themselves becoming the dinosaur or the monster or the fairy or the pirate or whatever. We had one of the settings that I've been working with, they did a pirate day, and one of the members of staff came in as a pirate. She didn't come out of what's the word? She stayed a pirate all day.
Yes, out of
And
character. Yeah.
character, that's the word. And there was one little boy who slowly got a bit more nervous because she was a bit too convincing. So every 2 minutes she'd lift her eye patch and go, "No, don't worry, it's only me," and then put her eye patch, and then he'd get really into it and enjoy the pirate. And then he'd start going, "Hang on a minute," and she'd go, "No, no, it's only me," and she had to do that all day. But she was this pirate, and the children talked about it for weeks. Do you remember when that pirate came to our setting? And it's such a lovely thing, just simple imagination. And again, it's something that gets sidelined a bit, I think, what with the hyper realism of things like screens. So you talk about Jurassic Park, but
Mhm.
that was a real turning point, wasn't it? Because as an older person, when we watched films about dinosaurs, they were made of plasticine. They looked nothing like
Mm.
dinosaurs, and you filled in the gaps yourself. Whereas Jurassic Park really set the bar, didn't it, for realistic
Yeah.
looking things. and there's less imagination. And don't get me wrong, I'm not, those are brilliant and films that have got this incredible CGI, fantastic films, but they do take away some of that imagination. And I think we need to give it back by pretending to be dinosaurs on a regular basis.
Well, certainly the children in my setting do. They do like being dinosaurs. Now, there was something else I was thinking, and it's been brewing in the back of my mind from something else that you'd said. It's that bit where, you made that comparison between a young child and a 19-year-old. And it's like, well, it made me think, it's like, when did we as adults or as late teenagers stop playing? Because why should we?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, because when examining some of the biochemical responses to play, there are many circumstances where as an adult you still get them. You might do it in different ways, but you still enjoy play. And we do a lot of parent play training. So working with a nursery setting, for instance, we try and get the parents on board as well. So that way, if we've got a whole like nursery all really valuing play, that's great. But if the children then go home and they're not getting enough play, then, so what we do is we bring parents on board. We do online training courses for parents. And the one thing you'll notice is the joy. So we do superhero play, but there's no children around. We get the adults away from the children. They're dressed up as superheroes. They're running around. And the comments you get are, I didn't expect to enjoy it so much. And even simple things like you get a bunch of parents in a den and you just see the grins on their faces. And it's one of the, the best bits of advice if you're wanting to support your parents to play more in the home is get them into your setting and get them playing, because that way they start to feel it and they feel just as good as their children do. Actually one of the first ones I ever did was quite funny, because I was a little bit nervous myself. I'd not done a parent session before. This is a few years ago now. And this one lady turned up on crutches and was so antagonistic and genuinely mean to me that the whole beginning of the training was really uncomfortable. And she just kept criticizing everything that I said. I think she felt like she was being taught how to parent, and that made her more resistant. Anyway, so midway through we made dens, and she stole some biscuits and sat in this den and ate the biscuits, and it was like a light bulb. It transformed her whole personality. And from that moment, she joined in every single play thing that we did. And right at the end of the session, we did a loose parts play fashion show. So it's not like Bob the Builder or a princess or a firefighter. It's just old bits of material. And she found 2 sports cones, stuck them down her top, and became Madonna. And she bounced up and down on a pretend catwalk. And the funniest thing is that after the session, 10 minutes after the session, there was a knock on the door while I was clearing up. And she came in and went, "Oh, sorry, me duck, I've forgotten my crutches." And she picked up her crutches and walked out again. She was having so much fun playing that she'd actually forgotten she was in pain. So yeah, what a lovely moment. So yeah, get parents playing, and it does open their eyes, and you do get some of the benefits. There are some things, though, sorry, not wanting to go on, but there are some things that we don't seem to get the benefits from. So children need to have a really good sense of balance, because it's really intrinsic to survival. So they calibrate their inner ear. They do all sorts of things, like a 2-year-old will automatically walk on a wall, won't they, when you walk past the wall, because they have to balance. They're not doing it consciously, it's instinctive. But you'll also get children who just spin round until they feel sick with a huge grin on their face. And that's a behavior that does stop in adult life. And one of the reasons is we believe that because you've already calibrated your inner ear and you've sorted your balance, you no longer need those behaviors. So you don't get the corresponding biochemical reward that a child gets. So you get to a certain age and you say to your children, "Oh, come on, let's go on the waltzes. I used to love these." And then halfway around, you just go, "Oh God, this is horrible." Because your children are getting all of those wonderful biochemicals like benzodiazepines that you get through play. They've got big grins on their faces, but you just feel sick. So there is a point where some of the play behaviors we don't do anymore. And adults will really only spin around a lot when they've had a few now. Whereas other things, genuinely, I mean, we get, 60-year-olds doing the superhero play and absolutely loving it. And you can see how much joy they're experiencing. So yeah, we need to play all the time, as much as we can.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that I know, and this is going back a few years into one of my previous settings, and we had a parents get together one evening, and we actually set up various activities that we do with the children. And there was that, I was thinking about what you're describing there, about that parent that came in and was quite defensive. But the parents that came in to see this kind of sat back a minute and just weren't sure what we're doing. It was like, "Well, come on, let's make some Play-Doh." And they were like, "Can we do this?" And I'm like, "Of course you can." And we showed them how to do it. And once we showed them how to play, they were right into it.
Yeah.
And that bit, it's like, if we're showing the parents how to play, then they can play alongside their children and extend the play that they've started at nursery.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like as adults we need permission, don't we?
Yeah.
Because it's not considered an adult thing, it's considered a child thing. But actually, once you get the parents involved, and well, the reason we started doing the parent play training was because we'd been doing stay and play sessions, and actually the parents weren't engaging at this particular project. And so we thought, well, we've got to do something. So we decided to give them a session away from the children so that they could play themselves without feeling self-conscious. And that is how we do it now, and it works really well. We get sort of very broad mix of social groups and parents of all ages, and it's that unifying thing once they play together. And there's been some wonderful bonding moments, between the parents and other parents and parents and setting staff, because you're sharing those moments, sat in a den or running around outside being a superhero, or whatever it is that we're doing on the sessions. So it's a really wonderful thing to see, and yeah. And it's not saying that parents don't play with their children. It's just that with the pressures of being a modern parent, we've got less chance and less time to do so. So, we're not saying that, that anybody's doing anything wrong. What we're trying to say is we're only human. We can't play with our children all the time, but even a little bit of extra play, one more day in the park or 10 more minutes without the TV is going to be really beneficial for your children.
Definitely. It's that bit as well. Like, I mean, if you examine different areas of society, and we know that some areas of society are more socially deprived or, financially deprived than others. And there is that bit where some people don't know, like some adults in particular, don't know how to play. And it's almost like we have to teach them as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, play's an instinctive behavior, and children shouldn't need to be taught how to play because they should do it instinctively. But they do still need that permission, because there are many children that are coming from households where, because play's not been prioritized, and that's no fault of parents at all, it's not taught on antenatal training, for instance, then it's almost like you need to give them the permission to do the silly things because they're not able to take the cushions off the sofa in their home and make a den out of them, for instance. But they're not allowed to take their shoes and socks off and squidge their toes in the mud, whereas in our nursery settings and our after school clubs they are. So it is sometimes about permission. And I do understand what you're saying about sort of social groups, and we do see quite a difference between the different groups of parents that we work with, so from inner city areas, for instance, to rural areas. But I do think that the decline in play is cross demographic. I think that you're just as likely to have a child from an inner city, more deprived area that doesn't get the same level of play in the home as you are from a more affluent area where perhaps the parents have no time, or their children do a lot of clubs maybe, so they might go to tennis on a Monday and Pilates on a Tuesday, whatever. But those moments of free play are still absent. So that's what we try and get across to the parents. It's about that freedom to explore. That's when you get the real benefits from play. And yeah, modern parent training in this country does not really mention play. We did antenatal training when when my wife was pregnant, and they told us the important stuff about being with a baby, like how to feed a baby, how to change a nappy, how to bath a baby safely, all of the health and safety stuff. But they'd never said play with your child because it'll help their brain development. And the other one they need to say is turn your phone off and talk to your child because their communication language will
Yeah.
struggle. So
No.
this is missing, and I think that's a real problem perhaps in society, and that's why play is so undervalued.
I think so. Again, it's going back to how we started this conversation, in that the word play is too frivolous. It's almost a throwaway word. It's like, oh, it's just play. It's not important. But it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's building a better understanding of it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, my son's 15 now, and he's just started volunteering on some of our sessions. And I don't think he gets it. So a few weeks ago, he was on a project where we were helping the adopted children to bond with their new families. Really lovely project. And we take them out in the woods. But my son was playing with this one particular child, and they were running around, jumping off stuff, doing piggyback races and obstacle courses, just having the best time ever. And at the end of it, my son just went, "So is that your job then? You just play?" And he just didn't get that. To him, it might have been a throwaway moment, that moment of play with that 6 or 7 year old. But to that child, it's a huge deal. Actually, having a teenager who takes an interest in you and your life and what's important to you, which is play, that is massive to that child. To their confidence, to their self-worth, their well-being. But it's also all that physical stuff, jumping off stuff and running. So it's a huge deal. But it's very difficult to get that across to people sometimes.
It is. It's like, thinking about that situation there. what your son was doing was actually providing validation for the child that it's okay to play,
Yeah,
despite whatever background they've gone through. And, obviously they're going through the care system of sort of being adopted. But actually, his actions provided validation for this other child that
yeah.
play is okay.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is my son didn't know this, is that that little boy, when he'd been first adopted, so he's been adopted for a few years now, but he was morbidly obese because in his early years he'd not been allowed to move. So he was at extreme risk of health complications. Apparently, he'd been fed on Greg's sausage rolls and McDonald's, and that's why he'd needed adopting in the first place.
Mhm.
And now, fast forward a couple of years later, he's so full of energy, he's jumping off stuff, and he's getting the exact play that he's had restricted. So it's
Mhm.
even more special to that child that my son's just there joining in and validating in, like you said. But yeah, my son was just like, oh, okay.
Not quite seeing it yet. It's still through teenage eyes. There's the other bit as well. It's like 'cause you were talking there about being outdoors with them. Do you think there is a difference between play indoors and play outdoors? And is one better than the other, or are
That's
they
an
equally
interest.
valuable?
It's an interesting question. I suppose the first thing is that the one that's being restricted the most is obviously outdoor play.
Mhm.
And when you look at the research on what just simply being outdoors gives to children, then it's a no-brainer. We need to get children outdoors more. So it's not that outdoor play is better, it's that the absence of outdoor play is catastrophic. So it's no longer a case of there's just a couple of bits of research. It's a concordance of evidence that says get your children outdoors, kick them out. Well, don't kick them, but yeah, get your children outdoors because it affects every aspect of their well-being, their development. Children learn better outdoors. Children short and long-term memory retention is better outdoors. Children's behavior is better outdoors. There's been some studies with children, so neurodiverse children, that shows that their behavior symptoms can be mitigated much more if they're outdoors in a natural environment than if they're in a concrete environment, and even more if they're indoors. So I don't think it's the outdoor play and indoor play. We're not comparing them. They both have the role to play. They're both
Yeah.
really important. But outdoor play is the one that's suffering the most, I think. So that's the one we need to focus on, because we know that in the rest of a child's life, that's the one they're less likely to have had as much of, if that makes sense. So like after school clubs, for instance, I mean, I don't do games consoles in after school clubs because
Mhm.
I know they've probably got those at home.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to provide a balanced experience for them. So that's the group I will take outside the most, because that's, I know statistically, is the experiences they're not going to have as much of. Doesn't mean that the games consoles are intrinsically bad. They can actually be really socializing for children. They can share their experiences, and they chat to each other on headsets. So it's not saying that's bad. It's just that the experiences they're missing by doing that exclusively are much more important. So getting outside and digging a hole is more neurologically rich than being on a computer game.
Yeah.
That's not saying that the computer games are intrinsically bad, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I
It's
love my
about finding that right sort of balance, isn't it?
Yeah,
To,
yeah,
things that they want to do, but things they haven't yet experienced.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I know, like, I've been in early years for the last 26 years, and I'm currently managing an outdoor nursery. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm seeing the difference between having been an indoor practitioner for so many years. In
Yeah,
fact, one of my colleagues also does some training and things like that. But he you played a clip on the phone of the noise level of play. Now, it showed engagement within the room, but it was the noise level inside, and played it back on his phone. And I had to cover my ears because it was so loud. But then the noise level outside, and it was the same group of children. But again, it was the difference there. They were engaged and they were quieter because they were busy.
yeah,
There was that space as well.
yeah. And even if they had been the same volume, it wouldn't have felt the same because you're not in an enclosed space.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had an adventure playground years ago that the architects had decided to build it with no windows and a metal corrugated roof. And one of my friends he was an IT specialist, and he came over to do a robot workshop. So we just booked him to come in, but he wasn't used to working with children in that kind of environment. And he walked in, and you could just see the panic on his face because the sheer noise of
Mhm.
100 children in an enclosed space with a tin roof. It was just overwhelming. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if you look at all the research on outdoor nurseries, it is so beneficial for children. It affects everything from their, children who spend and have an outdoor early years have less sick days when they're adults. They are healthy, fundamentally healthy because of the outdoor experiences. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of what children get from those outdoor nurseries. I will just say you don't look old enough to have been working with children for 26 years.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
See, I think I look quite young for my age, but I also know that inside I'm really old. I'm a shriveled old man. So bits of me have just stopped working and like my knees have gone. I think it's like, again, being working with children, I'm on my knees a lot because
yeah.
I like to be down on a child's level. And I think over the years yeah, damaged my knees irreparably and I can barely walk some mornings. So yeah, we did a session in a school and they were trying to do flips where you it's called a kip up. It's when you're lying on the floor and you flip yourself on your feet, and it
Mhm.
was just a way to get some boisterous play through to these children. And we were having a great time, but none of us could do it. So you end up flipping and then landing in a jarring heap on the floor.
Yes.
And the next day I went into the school and the children were like, "How can we do kip ups again?" And I was like, I can't actually move, but you go for it because just that, 20 minutes of impact with the ground had finished me off. I was just a mass of bruises, and like a child's bruise lasts like a minute, doesn't it? Whereas an
Yeah.
adult, you've got it 3 weeks later, you're still
Yes.
sore. So welcome to the podcast where we moan about being old.
Absolutely. That's a whole hour or two that's coming up there.
two old, two old childcare workers moaning about the world.
But it's that bit is that we do like, a serious kind of point for that is we do end up battering and bruising ourselves
Oh
because we're
yeah.
so in the moment of play with that
Yeah.
with the children that actually, do you know what? Yes, I'm going to have that bruise for the next 6 weeks, but it was worth it because did you see the look on their faces? Did you see the joy they got
Yeah.
out of it?
Yeah. Well, I had a child crack my rib once.
Oh,
Again, this was after school club, and it was just a simple running around game. I tripped, he tripped, and he landed knee first on my rib cage,
oh,
and it hurt a lot at the time. But the next day, I thought, oh, do you know what? It's not too bad. And then I sneezed. Oh, the pain! So I ended up going to the hospital, and they said, "Yeah, you've got a cracked rib." And he said, "We can't do anything for it. You just have to put up with it, but it will hurt when you cough or when you sneeze." And yeah, for weeks afterwards, I had to be so careful. And it's
oh
just
my
that's just children. Yeah.
I know they do, but it's that bit as well, though, that they just lose themselves in their play.
Yeah.
It's wonderful when you see a group of children. Like I'm going back to my dinosaur child today. There was just this whole group of them. Like I know we've got the usual plastic dinosaurs out in the garden, and they do use them. But today it wasn't the plastic dinosaurs that they needed. It was just each other, and they just played, and it was wonderful.
We talking of the plastic dinosaurs, we had some children decide to do dinosaur makeover. So we've got these quite big plastic dinosaurs, and somebody decided to paint the toenails on the dinosaur, and then they were putting sequins on. And it became like a production line where a clean dinosaur would come into this like shop, and then it would come out the other end like completely, sequined and bits of fur around their necks and loads of face paint and all sorts. And that honestly, that's got to be 40 minutes of them intricately, transforming these dinosaurs. And then we washed them off and they got to do it again the next day. So yeah, there are some really nice ideas when children go with their own ideas and
Yeah.
interests. And it was lovely to see so many of the boys as well, meticulously painting the toenails on the dinosaurs. And it was just a different sort of play, but still using their interests. So I think that was lovely.
Yeah, I mean that's an important thing as well for children's play is following their interests.
Yeah.
Is I mean, you'll know it as well, coming from the dark days where you had to plan everything meticulously and everything had to be programmed about a month in advance of what you were going to do. And to now, where it's like, well, is this what you want to do? Okay, let's see what we've got. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think children get more from that.
Yeah, I think the trick is that if you work with children, it's not being scared of that free play and not being afraid to throw any kind of learning outcomes out the window, but being able to articulate what's going on in this moment, because you are still going to get the outcomes. They just might not be the outcomes that you planned for.
Mhm.
There's still going to be an incredible amount of learning, and if you can articulate that to, for instance, an Ofsted inspector, then that's what in the moment planning is all about. It's about recognizing that those children have directed their learning and their play completely themselves, but
Mhm.
you're then able to go, yes, but look at what Ahmed's doing or Rizwan or Jessica's doing, and yeah, I think that's the wonderful thing is when children explore themselves, then that's when the sky's the limit. I did some work in some schools that were built by the same architect, so to the same school, and the reception classes were really good in both schools. But in one, their outdoor area was all concrete and little tykes type climbing frames and bikes and that sort of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. The children loved it. But the other, it was all loose parts play. It was crates and sticks and places to dig, and they got free access to water. They could go and get the water anytime they wanted. And it was like a different age of child. Watching the two groups, the children who were able to freely explore their environments seemed like much older children, because the level of their social interactions and the level of their physical interactions with the environment was at such a high level.
Yeah.
The clever bit was that, I don't know if it was deliberate, but there was a hole in the bucket. So the children had to problem solve every time they wanted to take water from the tap to the hole they dug, because it was coming out at the bottom. So they were padding the bottom of the bucket with stuff. And that's physical problem solving in the real world. That's a brilliant skill to give to children, isn't it?
It's
And you
brilliant.
barely saw an adult. They were stood around, they were supporting. They weren't stood around in a kind of arms folded, I'm not interested way. They were there, fully in the moment, but not actually having to interact, because the children were
Yeah.
taking play to the next level.
They weren't directing it, the children were.
No.
Brilliant. Well, Ben, thank you so much for talking to us on the podcast. It's been absolutely brilliant to kind of share that magic of play and actually to expand its meaning to what it actually is.
Oh no, thank you. It's been a pleasure. The time has just gone, hasn't it?
It really has.
It was, so yeah, we'll have to do our old men moaning podcast.
That sounds like, yeah, I think we could get away with that one. I think we'll have
Yeah,
to try that one
two
sometime.
old blokes moaning about how their bodies don't work as well anymore. It's been an absolute pleasure, Glenn, and yeah, hopefully I'll catch up with you again sometime.
That'd be brilliant. Well, Ben Kingston-Hughes, thank you so much.